everybody. Today is the 49th episode of Let's Do Lunch, and it's Thursday. So today is our Rights Tech Roundtable, which is led by our friend and colleague Paul Sweeting, which I'll invite onto the show in just a moment. First off, I mentioned this yesterday, and I wanted to bring it up again here. Tomorrow's show is going to be a little different than some of the ones we've done in the past. Tomorrow, we're going to focus on race at work in the entertainment industry. We have Sharon Dargan, who is SVP at Live Nation. She also heads the Black Employee Resource Group at Live Nation, and she'll be joined by talent manager Jonathan Azu, who runs Culture Collective. And able to do it, we're actually going to have everybody on video and invite folks to come on to the show to participate in and give comments and ask questions. So that'll be tomorrow at noon, and we'll be sending out more details. All right, Paul, who do you have on the show today?
Thanks, Ned. We have with us, she'll be joining us in a minute. There she is, Nadira Azermai, who is the founder, CEO of ScriptBook, which is a fascinating company. I'm very excited to be chatting with her. Before we get to that, I wanted to just note a few interesting headlines from the world of rights tech in the past week. A company called International Literary Properties, which was formed about a year ago. It's based in London, I believe. Acquired the literary estates of 12 writers this week, including some rather prominent writers: Evelyn Waugh, author of Brideshead Revisited, and many other notable novels. Also Robert Bolt, who wrote the screenplays for Dr. Zhivago, Lawrence of Arabia, and a number of other big films. And what I found interesting about that is that this is a company that was formed specifically for investing in and then managing literary estates, which struck me as having a lot of echoes with a trend we've been watching and talking about here, involving music publishing catalogs, where people are starting to look at music publishing catalogs as essentially an investment vehicle, a financial asset. And there's seems to be some interest building in the literary world for a similar sort of approach. So I'm going to be very interested to see how that develops and see if we can't get the international literary property folks to join us on a future webinar. Another interesting headline past week, which is directly relevant to what what Nadira and I will be talking about, is that the Hollywood industry essentially submitted its plans to the governors of California and New York this week to reopen production with some guidelines for coping with the COVID-19 pandemic. And one of the things that is part of that, and is a greater reliance on technology for various kinds of remote and virtual production, often incorporating technology developed in the game industry, including artificial intelligence technology, which bears directly on, or at least runs parallel with what Nadira and I will be talking about, which is the use of artificial intelligence to analyze scripts, movie scripts, before and as an aid to guiding decisions about whether or not to produce the film or finance the film. And It's a relatively new application of AI technology, certainly new to me. Let me just tell you a little bit about Nadira. She, as I mentioned, is the founder and CEO of ScriptBook, based in Antwerp. And Nadira actually came up with the idea. It grew out of her master's thesis that she was working on, which was focused on, well, I assume you finished the thesis or not, I don't know. But it was focused on using AI to quantify story parameters, literary story parameters into a predictive model. Apparently she got so excited about that project that she detoured from her plans to pursue the PhD and decided to start the company that's now known as ScriptBook. Thanks very much for joining us. It's great to have you here, Nadira.
Thanks for having me, Paul.
I know we call this series Let's Do Lunch. In Antwerp, it's actually past dinner time. Yep. I thank you for taking a chunk out of your evening. So that was a little bit about the origins of ScriptBook. Tell us a little bit more about what your goal was in starting the company.
Sure. The company was founded in 2015, and the goal was very simple. We wanted to build an AI-driven script analysis and content validation platform. AI was at that time being used in every industry. You had AI being used in fintech and health tech, pretty much any industry, but the entertainment industry was still following the ancient methodology that everybody knows, the traditional approach. So there was no decision support, there was no technology. And for us, it seemed quite obvious that this would be a tool that people would use. We thought, okay, this is the holy grail of Hollywood. Back then I was quite naive, but I thought this is the holy grail. So we developed the system because what the system really did back then was take a script and analyze it, break it down and analyze it on different levels. So basically a full analysis took about 6 to 7 minutes, and the system would come up with a number of sophisticated outputs. It would literally give you information about the script DNA. It would give you information about the storyline characters, about the demographics, audience satisfaction, financial forecast, etc. So that was the original goal of ScriptBook.
Okay, so what happened then?
Pivot, no, not pivot, but we stayed with the original goal. But the thing is, when you develop new technology, especially with this industry, I'll call it Hollywood, they're very, well, they don't necessarily adopt innovation because of the traditional approach. So when we started out, we actually thought, okay, we need to validate this technology as soon as possible. And we embarked very early on validation trajectories with small companies initially, the early adopters, as they call them. So they tested they became our trial customers. They tested the system, were happy with it. They shared with us data, and we got a lot of feedback from those early adopters. That was part one, and basically when we finished up that, and we were happy because those early adopters became also the very first clients. And early adopters tend to be, let's say film funds, film finance companies, but also film distributors, not the production companies yet or the studios. That was part one. And then when you validate your technology, you need more validation, because for us, we thought, okay, this is the time to reach out to studios. We need to reach out to studios and see whether they would use our technology. So we reached out to studios, and it was, I have to say, we didn't have any difficulty in getting into the studio and try to pitch the project and get started with validation. But the thing is, the validation within a studio takes a very long time. if you count, it takes anything from 18 to 24 months to finish up a proof of concept with the studio. If you count, let's say, the whole auditing process, the legal, you know, the actual POC, the results afterwards. Now, one thing was that our system, we knew our system would outperform any company. So it outperformed humans with the
Whoa, wait, hold on there a second. What do you mean it outperformed humans? It outperformed humans how exactly? What?
Well, basically for us, metrics were, would our system be more accurate in predicting, for example, commercial success? Would our system be more accurate in greenlighting projects that actually turn out to be, you know, appealing to audiences? Would our system be more accurate in detecting, you know, value-destructing titles, films that don't do well? So these are all the questions that we wanted to answer within a validation trajectory. And the results were very, very good. So basically, our technology very early on was able to spot scripts that had potential, was able to spot films that had a commercial viability or would do very, very well commercially. And when we compared whatever we selected, you know, the green lights versus the red lights, when we compared that with the actual data from the studio or from the company, then we had far more higher accuracy rates. So this is what I mean with outperforming humans.
So what are you actually analyzing, or what does your algorithm actually analyze? Can you show us an example of how you would go about analyzing a script? You know, what parameters are you looking at?
I can definitely show you. I mean, I can show you a demo, show you a sample of a script analysis, for example.
Yeah.
Let me just share my screen. All right, okay. Let me know if you can see my screen, Paul.
No, not yet. No.
Let's try again.
Oh.
Oh, I get host disabled participant screen sharing. Hold on, I think that's the issue with screen sharing, I think.
Can you, Laura, can you make her a co-host so that she's able to share her screen?
All right, I think it's going to work. Right.
There we go.
Perfect. All right. I'll go to our marketplace, and I'll actually show you scripts or analysis of scripts on our marketplace. Now, this is an open marketplace where everybody, I mean, writers can upload their scripts. And I specifically want to show one script because it's from an unknown writer, but had actually a very good analysis by our system. It's called 60 Feet Under. There you go. So what I want, so basically, if you would use our software.
Hold on 1 second. So this is a script from a writer whose name isn't, I guess, so the writer uploaded this to your platform.
Exactly. So we have a script marketplace where writers are allowed to upload their materials. So basically, this is a script that was uploaded by a writer to our marketplace. And the analysis of we require a PDF version of the script in order to do the analysis. It takes, I would say, about 6 to 8 minutes for a full analysis of a script. And what you would get is actually this. As you can see here, you see the menu. You would get metrics under script DNA, metrics under audience, and also the financial forecasts. So for example, in this case, 60 Feet Under, this was analyzed for one of the writers that uploaded his scripts on the platform. You can see we start out with predicting things as genre. We also predict things as the MPA rating. Now, I'll give a few explanation with MPA rating. Basically, what our team did, we developed classifiers that actually detect violence, alcohol, nudity, you name it. And based on that, the algorithm, as you can see, will classify a script as R-rated or PG-13. It will assign a probability to a script. We also, under Script DNA, show you similar movies, not just similar movies by one certain topic. We show you similar movies that will draw, for example, a similar target audience right here. We also show similar movies by topics or themes. We will show you similar movies by genre, by audience reach, audience and critics rating, so that you have an idea about the project that you are reading or analyzing. I'm not going to show everything, but for example, I'll show you the likability. Now, as you can see, the system detects completely automated protagonist, antagonist, and it will assign likability scores to character in your script. And how we did that is the following. So basically, what we trained, actually we trained the system. The system learned to understand language. And by using natural language processing, and this is called NLP, it's a subfield of AI. Basically, it allows computers to understand language syntactically and semantically. The next step is actually having, kind of defining what is it that you would like to predict. Let's say you want to predict box office, then you will need huge amounts of box office data. Or in this case, we want to predict the lead protagonist in a certain script. So for this case, we require labels. So basically annotations done by humans. So we labeled, for example, to detect the protagonist, we labeled thousands and thousands of scripts. You know, each script got a label, who is the lead protagonist. And then this information is actually being inputted in machine learning algorithms. You know, and machine learning algorithms will detect patterns, low-level and high-level patterns. And that's which again will show you whatever you want to predict. So it's really, you can either use data to spot patterns, but some outputs, as likability, for example, really requires labels. And this is, for example, the case with likability. The same thing with, for example, detecting emotions in characters with the emotion summary. Now, this is, again, a feature that we manually labeled. Gender equality, same thing. We detect whether there is gender bias in a script. As you can see, this is actually a good script for gender bias because it passes gender equality. Shows you also which scenes pass, how are the interactions between gender. And then towards the audience, we predict the target audience split, also the age groups, audience satisfaction metrics, such as, you know, everybody knows IMDb rating, Rotten Tomatoes, etc. We also position the project among other films so that you have an idea whether, for example, this movie, is it this film project rather, 60 Feet Under, does it fall, will it reach a wide audience, or is it more catered towards niche audiences? And then of course the financial forecasts, which are also important. We predict production budgets in this case, as you can see, 30 million. And also US box office. Now, I know with the whole Corona thing, people say, oh yeah, box office is not important anymore, but this is a very good proxy. Not just, it's a good proxy whether a certain project is commercially viable or not, whether it comes out on VOD or in theaters. But this is, for example, one of the best scoring scripts on our marketplace. It has actually a very high box office prediction. Also, I'll just, speed up. For example, you want to know, is this a project that will have a receptive audience around the world? So we show you probabilities for each part of the world and whether whether it will have an audience, yes or no. And again, it's not just US box office. We do this for all countries in Europe and outside Europe. As you can see, we predict box office by country, the international box office as well. So, and one thing that's also important before I end with this analysis. We don't have just one predictive model. We have about 30 predictive models. So when people upload their script, or when a company uploads its script, of course you only have a script. So we will use our script model. But along the line, when you have, for example, a cast attached, or you have a production company attached, all of this information is important. So this will be added again, and we will use a different predictive model. So it's important to know that it's not, the number is not, the number is alive. It will move along with where you are in the chain of your project. And this is how a script analysis looks like.
Great. Before we go on, I just wanted to remind folks that there is a chat function you have there on Zoom. If you open your chat window down at the bottom of the screen there, you can chat with the other folks who are listening in today. If you do that, there's a little drop down at the bottom of the chat window. Make sure that's set to all panelists and attendees so everyone can see it. There's also a Q&A window, which you can open up also along the bottom of the screen there. And if you do have any questions for me or for Nadira, please put them in the Q&A queue rather than the chat queue, because I may not see them in the chat queue. So obviously you had to ingest an enormous amount of box office data to be able to do this, particularly by territory. That must have. So where did you get all that data? Just from public sources, or
everywhere, everywhere, Paul. Online, we pretty much scraped everything that you can find online, but also we received a lot of data from companies that we worked with. Sometimes you end up working with a company that's actually very open to sharing data, to sharing scripts. I remember one of the early distributing companies that we worked with shared a Dropbox with us that had about, I think, close to 6,000 scripts. So we get information, we get data from the companies that we work with. And of course, we scrape our own data. And that all leads to a data set of 30,000 scripts.
And so for sort of subjective parameters like likability, so you had humans assigning those tags, I guess, for lack of a better term, to them. How did you, tell me about that process? How did you define likability in order to put a number on it?
Well, good question. Basically, I remember it was summertime and we brought in film students. We brought in like a large group of film students and asked them to based on a scale. So I remember our CTO, putting together a scale, and we asked them to rate the likability of characters in a script. And the thing was, in order to actually agree that a certain character is likable, we had to have an internal agreement rate of 75%, meaning that 75%, at least 75% of that group all had to say, this is a character that we find likable. So this is how we actually started working on the likability feature.
So, so in this case, the writer uploaded this script. Does the writer pay for that, or how does that work?
No, well, basically, the longer roadmap for ScriptBook was basically we wanted to in the future, with future I mean next year, we wanted to have an ecosystem, really democratize this space and build an ecosystem that's accessible to everybody. But with the whole Corona crisis happening, we were thinking about, okay, how can we pay it forward? And literally we just kind of had a quick brainstorm over Zoom and thought, okay, let's open up the software to independent screenwriters. let them use the software, upload their material, use it to their own benefit. And in the meantime, we'll set up partnerships with companies so that companies can actually come and source validated content. So this actually was all driven or put in a higher speed because of the Corona crisis. And this is what you see. We call it the Corona script marketplace, but just FYI, it's not because of Corona. It was meant to roll out next year, but because of Corona, we just thought to release a beta version.
So the idea here is to create essentially a marketplace where writers can have scripts validated, evaluated.
Well, basically, when we started with the company, our focus was analyze and predict. And when we were doing the whole proof of concepts, and with companies and hearing what the opinions are, you always have resistance within the field, within the industry, because again, Hollywood isn't keen on technological tools. But the thing is, for us,
they're getting a little better.
It's getting far better than it used to be, for sure. You have actually, I always say there is a dualistic nature. You have really a part of the industry that's very welcoming to anything that's innovative, that they want to try it out, they want to use it. And then you also have, a group that really prefers to stay traditional in their approaches. But for me personally, I actually remember having a conversation with a futurist of one of the large companies in LA at a conference, and I was speaking with him and I asking him, how can I overcome resistance? Because it's so hard, for example, to get company X or Y sign up, and how do I go about? And this futurist gave me some really good advice, and he said, you have to beat them at their own game. So that made me really think about what does he mean with beat them at their own game. I remember after that, I came back and I spoke to my team. I said, okay, we have built a validation platform driven by AI, and it's time now to go to phase 2, which is literally, it's co-create. We want not just analyze and predict, we want our AI to be able to co-create as well. And this is another part of ScriptBook, but this is another part of ScriptBook, but basically we wanted to co-create as well. So that was the birth actually of Deep Story. We just thought, okay, we spent years learning about stories, the structure of stories, and now we have enough expertise to use that and use the features that we built and use them into an automated story generator. So basically a generator.
Yeah, we'll get to that, but before we do, when we spoke earlier, you mentioned that since the COVID-19 situation hit us all, you've actually gotten interest or inquiries from I guess production companies primarily, or financiers, asking about whether you could incorporate parameters relevant to COVID, trying to produce films during COVID-19 into your analysis. Can you, what does that mean exactly? What is a COVID-safe film script mean?
Well, it's it was actually one of a question that came from a number of companies that reached out to us, asking, in these Corona times, would technology help in spotting projects that would be that they could produce in Corona times? And basically, if we were able to build some sort of a COVID-free filter in our analysis, it's a question that came from a number of companies. I think it's everything has changed, and if you want to resume a production, you need to be insured. I think insurance companies are probably a difficult topic right now because of the whole COVID thing. And I think it's a legit question, though. I think a lot of companies, they want to resume production, but they want to focus as well on projects that won't be a big liability. So we have some companies sending us a list of for example, metrics that would make a certain project COVID safe and COVID free. And we're definitely looking into that. I mean, if we can help out in any way, we will do that, of course. But it's definitely something that I think the first call that we got was about 2 to 3 weeks ago. So I think it's going to be an important topic for the next 2 years, that companies will focus on projects that they can actually produce in these times
and get insured. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Becoming a rather huge issue within the industry, particularly independent films. I mean, the big studios are able to get insurance or insure themselves, but any independent production has to be able to insure the production before that anyone would finance it. So. So yeah, that's definitely a big issue. So let's talk a little bit more about AI's role broadly in the creative process. You're obviously analyzing a creative product, a script, and evaluating it against essentially numeric parameters. What do you think? How do you respond to folks who say AI is sort of the opposite of creativity, or could harm in some way the creative process of filmmaking or any other creative endeavor?
Mm-hmm. Of course, I hear their concerns. I hear their concerns for sure, because they have this fear that technology will probably, affect creativity, or will probably single out only those projects that are commercially viable and have no artistic value. But that's not the case. It's even I think by using AI, you actually are enhancing creativity, because the AI, as we've seen throughout the whole proof of concept that we did in the past years, it actually ranks artistic projects much higher than the as we call it, the big blockbusters. So I would definitely, I keep saying this in every talk that I do, that AI will not affect creativity. It's not going to affect creativity, because I see what kind of project our system actually handpicks, literally, and there are always projects that you would say, oh, I can't believe this is actually something that an AI selected. It really goes to stories that have an artistic value, that have a strong storyline as well. So it's definitely criticism that we get, and it's a concern with a lot of people. But I will always answer in the same way, that it will enhance creativity and not jeopardize it.
In fact, you've built another piece in ScriptBook called Deep Story, I believe, that actually sort of is intended to be a creative engine in its own right. Can you tell us a little bit about Deep Story?
Of course. I think earlier I mentioned quickly Deep Story. The thing is, when we built our first product, the Analyze and Predict, I think we had a lot of expertise, and we wanted to use it into something that would benefit everybody who actually creates stories. For us, we see it as a co-creator that or let's say it's a tool in the writer's toolkit. What Deep Story does, you have to think of this. I'm a writer, I'm starting from scratch. I wrote 2 lines, I have a writer's block, and I need inspiration. And an engine like this, like Deep Story, is able to actually read whatever a writer has written, take that into context, and generate the next sentence or the next scenes, or give just ideas on storyline. It really is made to help creatives. There is a war on content, and we believe by adding AI as a co-writer, this war on content will probably no longer exist, because you will have a lot of supply. It really is meant to bring out the creativity in humans, to collaborate with an AI and let them develop stories that probably wouldn't have existed without an AI.
We're kind of running out of time here, but could you quickly show us what that actually would mean?
Yeah, sure. Let me quickly share my screen. All right. This is, for example, this is just an alpha phase. So this is the interface that we use internally. It's not available on the internet or anything. But basically what it does, you can actually start from scratch and say, I want to generate an action film, for example, or rated. You can set in the budget. And you can actually say, I want to generate something that is somewhat like Superbad. And you can choose your characters. You can say, I want the fingerprints of the characters from Superbad. And then when you go to script, you can actually generate either a single sentence like this, or you can just hit play and say, I want to generate a full scene. And this is what the engine will do. It will generate a full scene. And that's just on a side note, AI-generated content feels as if it's written by a machine. It's not human. So it is very entertaining. People will laugh, but it is generated by a machine. So for us at this point, we want to make sure that the Deep Story engine becomes more consistent in its writing. And people can actually edit if a scene is generated and you don't like, for example, certain sentences, you can edit them. You can work with whatever has been generated by the generator. I think the scene is almost coming to an end. There you go. And you can actually...
Very cool.
There you go.
Okay, so we're coming up on time here. We do have a little audience poll that I'm going to put up to give folks who are watching a chance to weigh in on some of these, including, you know, AI's role in creativity. Can everyone see the audience poll? Can you see it there? Nadira, are you seeing it?
Yes, I can see it. Yes.
Okay, you can see it. So other folks can probably see it too. We do have a bunch of questions here. Let me get to that. And anyone who may have posted a question in the chat stream, feel free to repost it in the Q&A stream. We're more likely to get to it there. Beverly Sheep. When the use of AI becomes more widespread, is there a risk that scriptwriters learning to game the system, as it were, and tailoring their scripts for AI preferences? Is that an issue that that you've been asked about?
It's a good question. I think we're not there yet. Basically she's asking whether we can cheat on the AI, you know, by knowing what the preferences are, and then you will cheat the system. It would be hard. It's a difficult question because we're not there yet. So we need to be further in the process in order to know whether this will be possible or not. At this point, I would say no, because the variables that are taken into account are just way too high. I mean, the parameters taken into account are way too high. It would take another AI to cheat on this AI.
Takes a thief to catch a thief, huh? A very interesting question from, and very timely from David Watts. Hollywood is regularly believed that many black films or films with minority leads don't perform well, particularly overseas. How does ScriptBook's AI counteract false assumptions or systemic issues of systemic racial biases that deter the development and funding of films by and about blacks and other minority starring films?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, a few years ago, I think 2 years ago, a couple of our data scientists did an internal study on race and whether it's true that let's say a colored lead actor will not draw a large audience. And with that research, we knew that that wasn't the case. I don't know who actually ever invented that statement that if you have a colored actor as a lead, that your project wouldn't do well. For example, what we also developed, but it's not in our AI because we thought it would be sensitive. We actually built a race classifier. It sounds very racial, but it's not. I mean, it's just we thought it would be interesting to see whether certain films would appeal to certain demographics. Is race a predictive value? It's in the system. We spent the time and research on doing this. But again, as a technology company, we made the decision to not kind of show it in the analysis, to not make it part of the analysis. Because I don't know, we're data scientists and we don't know what the response would be from companies. Because early on, I think in one of the versions of the software, we had that race classifier still in it. And I remember companies in Europe saying, oh, why do you have that? I don't like that. You should take that away. So we decided not to make the whole racial classifier as part of the software. But let me just read again that question. But again, I have to refer back to our own research that we did on a data set, and it definitely is not true. There is no effect whatsoever. Having a black actor in the lead does not affect box office negatively in any way. I can tell you that from our own research that we did in the company.
Wow, that's actually a pretty powerful statement. That you can demonstrate statistically that the race of an actor actually is not deterministic or determinative of the box office success. That's a very interesting data point. Thank you for that.
Yeah, but it's an important topic as well.
It's a very important topic.
Yeah, of course.
And having actual data to inform the discussion on that is actually very, very interesting. Avi Kulkarni, I'm sorry if I just butchered that, wants to know if this is applicable, if your system would be applicable outside of movies, like in online video games that are often character-driven.
Well, if there is a script, then we can analyze it. And it's also a question that comes often to us from companies, gaming companies. Can we use your system for our games? The thing is, we need, because the whole system is actually script-based. It's driven by a script. We need a script. So it's definitely, if there is data, if we have enough data for, let's say, scripts for video games, then it's, of course, we can adapt and customize whatever we have currently for our film and TV analysis and customize it to games, for sure. It always goes back to, is there enough data for certain things? And another thing, deep story, for example, this is something that would be very applicable to games, because you need, developing games requires also storylines, and games the demographic for games are millennials, Generation Z. I know PewDiePie, for example, but it's like what PewDiePie would say and do. This is the kind of dialogue that we like. And Deep Story, because it's so weird and entertaining, you could almost say our Deep Story speaks PewDiePie. So it would be, it's honestly the truth. So for example, Deep Story would be a great use case for games, to literally get storylines for games and short form content. That would be an ideal use case.
Interesting. Nigel Newton with a question that it sort of goes back to the COVID question. What do you think about virtual production, and are there scripts that lend themselves better to being produced virtually? That is with with minimal need for bodies on sets. Is that something that you could that is already in the system, or something that you could build into the system?
Well, the thing is, I don't know
whether there's enough data to analyze on that.
But also, I think this is a question, I'm probably not the right person to answer that question, because I don't know much about virtual production, I'm assuming he's talking about virtual reality, right? Or is it
yes,
something
virtual
else?
reality, and increasingly films are being done on virtual sets right now, where they're actually just standing in a by a green screen and on a set, and it will look as if they're in a real environment.
Yeah, I understand the question, but unfortunately not the right person to ask. I don't have enough knowledge about virtual production, so sorry. Know thyself.
Nigel. Sorry about that.
Know thyself. I'm sorry. I don't want to give a wrong answer.
Let's see. Wow, we got a lot of questions. Does it work for children's content? AA wants to know. Anonymous wants to know.
I'm assuming with children content, you mean anything that's PG scripts, PG-13? Is that what? Content meant to draw audiences? Well, demographic, young.
It's not completely clear. Sorry about that. It's not completely clear. AA wants to weigh in with more details on that question. We'll try to get to it. Can you elaborate on how the Rosemary Aporo Jacobs, hi Rosemary, you're a regular on these, I see. Can you elaborate on how the generator might be a factor in the streaming wars and the the impact, its impact on acquisition of content, and will it eliminate any jobs? Which is a question everybody wants an answer to.
Well, the thing is, the generator is not meant to eliminate jobs. We are actually thinking about, that's the thing. We see it as a co-creator, because AI can never create content on its own. If you want to create content that's somewhat human and understandable, you need human input. So this is just a tool that will help writers create interesting, new, original content. That's one thing. So it's not eliminating job. And secondly, how the generator will help streaming wars and impact acquisition. Let me think about that question, because the link from generator to impact acquisition, I'll give my answer. I'm not sure if that's the answer you're hoping for, but the reason I always say this, when people hear about Deep Story, about the generator, they get terrified because they think, the computers will take over. But let's not forget this. A lot of people want to create, content, write stories with substance. But stories with substance require that you have an audience with substance that will understand them. That's one thing. Secondly, you need to see who is your audience, and the millennials, especially younger millennials and Generation Z. This is an audience that has completely different way of thinking. They're not keen on content that's being created today. They will not go watch a drama or a biopic. This is the generation that was raised by YouTube, and they love PewDiePie, and they love any YouTube and Instagram star. So it's really important to understand their language. And these are guys that were raised by video games, basically. You know, they know video games. These are the guys that are very much open to AI and AI written content. So if you really want to step into the 21st century as a writer, and you want to cater to demographics, that's really important. You have to make this click. Let's not forget that this younger generation, this younger group, there's research that shows that 65% of this group wants to become an Instagram star. It tells you a lot about their focus.
It tells you what they value the most. So
yes.
I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. I'm just going to share the results of our poll real quick. It looks like we have people pretty evenly spread throughout the industry. Production, pre-production, distribution. And how eager would you be to know the results of a script analysis if you were, considering investing in or acquiring a film? A lot of people, about a third, a little over a third, would be very eager, and the others would like to know but wouldn't find it essential. And only a few would rather not know. So that's a pretty good sign for you, Nadira. And what do you think, how do you think it will affect creative decision making? And plurality say it will, well, no, not quite, but 42% say it'll improve decision making. Plurality, 46% say it's too early to tell and they're not really sure. Mm-hmm. So thanks to everyone for filling out the poll and for your questions. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of them. Thank you, Nadira. We'll be back next week with the Rights Tech Roundtable. And of course, Ned has already talked about tomorrow's important business of music. Let me throw it back to Ned.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Nadira. I think that's a fascinating conversation. We're always interested in what's going on at these cutting edge areas of entertainment, and AI is certainly an area that we're all trying to figure out the impact and what it means for our industry. As Paul mentioned, tomorrow we have a conversation on race at work in the entertainment industry. We'll have John from Culture Collective and Siobhan Dargan from Live Nation on the show with us. And we're going to do it a little bit differently than before. We'll be an open forum, the second part, where we'll invite folks to have their videos on and to ask questions and make comments, and we hope that you'll join us. All right, everybody, stay safe, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks again, Nadira and Paul.
Bye-bye.
Bye.